The stage lights were blinding. They always were. But that night they felt heavier than usual, almost cruel, as if each beam was pressing directly onto his chest. The crowd was roaring, thousands of voices calling his name in unison, a sound that once filled him with pride and excitement. Now it felt distant, muffled, like noise coming from the other side of a wall he could no longer break through. Elvis Presley stood backstage, microphone in hand, heart pounding, not with anticipation, but with fear. For the world, this was another concert, another moment to witness the king in his element, another night of screaming fans, flashing cameras, and history being made. But for Elvis, this night was different. This night felt like a breaking point. Moments before stepping onto the stage, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His hands were trembling slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for him to feel it. He had performed countless times before, on radio stages, small halls, massive arenas, but never had the weight felt so unbearable. It wasn't just the performance he feared, it was himself, or rather, the version of himself he was becoming. Behind the curtain, the band was ready, the set list was prepared, everything on paper was perfect. Yet inside Elvis's mind, nothing felt under control. Doubts swirled relentlessly. Was he still good enough? Was the magic fading? Were the critics right this time? The questions repeated over and over, growing louder with every second. He had been living under pressure for years, pressure to be perfect, pressure to evolve, pressure to remain untouchable. The world had crowned him a king, but no one had taught him how to survive wearing the crown. Fame had lifted him to heights few could imagine, but it had also isolated him in ways no one could see. As the announcer called his name, the crowd erupted. That sound should have been reassuring. Instead, it made his stomach tighten. For a brief moment, just a fleeting, terrifying moment, Elvis considered not going out at all. The thought shocked him. Walking away from the stage had once been unthinkable. Now it felt dangerously tempting. He stepped forward anyway. The curtain opened and the lights flooded in. The applause was deafening. Fans screamed, cried, reached out toward him as if he was something more than human. Elvis smiled instinctively, a smile perfected over years of performances. But behind that smile was exhaustion, deep, bone-weary exhaustion that no amount of applause could cure. The first notes played, his voice followed, strong and controlled, just as the audience expected. To them, nothing seemed wrong. He sounded like Elvis. He moved like Elvis. He was Elvis. But inside, every word he sang felt heavier than the last. Each song became a test of endurance. As he sang, his mind drifted, not to the music, but to the growing sense of emptiness he had been carrying for months. The long tours, the endless expectations, the feeling that no matter how much he gave, it was never enough. He remembered nights spent staring at hotel ceilings, unable to sleep, wondering when the joy had slowly turned into obligation. The crowd wanted energy, they wanted passion, they wanted the legend. Elvis gave it to them because that was his job. But with every chorus, he felt like he was giving away pieces of himself he no longer had to spare. Between songs, the applause surged again. The audience was thrilled. They had no idea they were witnessing a man fighting a silent battle in real time. Depression doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like professionalism. Sometimes it looks like smiling through pain. Sometimes it looks like finishing the show, even when everything inside you is screaming to stop. At one point, Elvis turned away from the crowd just for a second. He wiped sweat from his face, but what he was really doing was grounding himself, reminding himself to breathe. His chest felt tight. His thoughts were racing. The stage felt larger, lonelier. He thought about how the world only ever saw the performer, never the person. To millions, he was a symbol, a fantasy, an icon. But icons weren't allowed to be weak. They weren't allowed to struggle. They weren't allowed to admit they were breaking. And so Elvis carried the weight alone. The songs continued, one after another. His voice never faltered, but his spirit did. Each lyric echoed parts of his own life, love, loss, longing, turning the performance into something painfully personal. He wasn't just singing anymore. He was confessing, whether he meant to or not. In the middle of the set, something shifted. A familiar fear crept in, the fear that this might be the night everything falls apart, that one missed note, one wrong step, one visible crack could give the critics exactly what they were waiting for. He imagined the headlines, the rumors, the whispers that would follow. Elvis is finished. That thought hit harder than any exhaustion. For a moment, the music faded into the background, and Elvis found himself standing in the spotlight, feeling impossibly small. The cheers sounded far away, his heart raced, his breath shortened. He had performed through illness, through grief, through heartbreak, but performing through a collapsing sense of self was something else entirely. Yet somehow he stayed. He sang the next song with everything he had left, not because he felt strong, but because quitting would have meant admitting defeat, not just to the world, but to himself. The stage had once been his refuge. Tonight it was his battlefield. As the show neared the end, the exhaustion turned into numbness. His body moved on instinct, guided by years of muscle memory. His voice carried on, trained to deliver even when the heart was struggling to keep up. The audience cheered louder than ever, sensing the intensity, unaware of its true source. When the final note rang out, the applause was thunderous. Fans stood, screaming his name, believing they had just witnessed another legendary performance. Elvis bowed, waved, smiled. He played the role to perfection. Then he left the stage. The moment he was out of sight, the weight crashed down. The smile faded. His shoulders slumped. The noise from the crowd echoed behind him, but it no longer mattered. He had made it through the night, but barely. Backstage, surrounded by familiar faces, Elvis felt strangely alone. No one asked if he was okay. No one suspected how close he had come to unraveling in front of thousands of people. And perhaps that was the most painful part of all, being surrounded by people and still feeling invisible. That night marked something important, though few realized it at the time. It was a warning, a sign that even legends have limits, that fame does not protect against mental exhaustion, and success does not silence inner pain. Elvis would go on to perform many more times. He would continue to give the world unforgettable music and unforgettable moments, but nights like this one left scars. They shaped him in ways that applause could never. This was the night that nearly destroyed his career, not because he failed, but because he almost lost himself trying not to. And perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that he struggled, but that he felt he had to struggle alone. Behind the legend, behind the spotlight, behind the thunderous applause, was a man desperately trying to hold himself together, one song at a time. That night, Elvis didn't just perform, he survived.